There are days when you wake up and feel as if the whole world is weighing heavily on your shoulders, not because something particularly big has just happened, but because in your mind everything seems to be tangled, and finished plans, and met expectations, and named worries. You begin to think more than necessary, analyzing everything to the point of exhaustion, trying to control things that were never within your reach. And then you wonder, why has life become so complicated? But there's a truth we rarely dare to face. Life is not as complicated as the way we are experiencing it. We ourselves, through our thoughts, our fears, our attachments, have unintentionally made everything more tangled. You are not just living one life. You are living hundreds of versions of that life in your mind. One version worries about the future. One regrets the past. One tries to be perfect in the eyes of others. And one constantly judges itself. All these versions overlap, forming a maze in which you keep searching for a way out without realizing that you are the one who built it. Pause for a moment and look deeply into this. Are you trying to do too many things at once? Trying to understand everything, control everything, solve everything immediately? You don't allow yourself to be simple. You don't allow yourself to not know, to be not ready, to be imperfect. And that lack of permission has turned every step in life into a silent battle. Life, when seen in its pure form, is simply a series of moments. One inhale, one exhale, one step, one glance. But the human mind does not accept that simplicity. It wants more. It wants certainty. It wants control. It wants to ensure that everything goes its way. And when that doesn't happen, as life naturally is, you begin to feel uneasy. You think you need more knowledge to understand better. You think you need more time to prepare better. You think you need more effort to achieve more. But the more you add, the more you feel lacking. The more you try to hold on, the emptier you feel. That is the paradox of modern life. The more we try to make things better, the more complicated life becomes. Perhaps what you truly need is not to add more, but to let go. Let go of unnecessary thoughts. Let go of the need to understand everything. Let go of the need to prove your worth to others. Let go of the need to control things that are always changing. Take a look at your day. How much of it is truly necessary, and how much is simply a product of habitual thinking? You worrying about things that haven't happened. You regret things that have passed. You compare yourself to unreal images, and all these things do not truly exist in the present moment, yet you still carry them like invisible bags, growing heavier by the day. You don't have to live like that. Life does not require you to be perfect. It does not require you to understand everything. It does not require you to always control everything around you. All that life truly asks of you is to be present in this moment, no more, no less, just here. But that is the hardest thing for a mind accustomed to complexity, because it feels like a loss of control. And that is the deep fear you have been avoiding. You fear that if you don't think enough, you will make mistakes. If you don't control tightly enough, everything will collapse. If you don't try your hardest, you will become meaningless. But perhaps that very fear is what is exhausting you. Try just once, not to fight it, not to run from it. Just see it as it is, and then you will realize that many things you are trying to hold on to were never yours. That many things you are trying to control were never in your hands. And that many things you are trying to understand do not need to be understood for you to live peacefully. Perhaps freedom is not in how much you gain, but in how much you dare to let go. And right now, as you read these lines, maybe you don't need to change your whole life. You just need to pause just a little and ask yourself a very simple question. Am I making things more complicated? If the answer is yes, then perhaps this is the moment for you to return to simplicity. Where life has never been as heavy as you imagine, complexity does not naturally arise in life. It is created little by little through the way you think, the way you react, and the way you cling to things that were only meant to pass through your mind like clouds. Look deeper into yourself, and you will see most of what exhausts you is not what is actually happening, but what you think about it. Someone's words in themselves, very simple, but your mind immediately analyzes. What do they mean? Are they judging me? Did I do something wrong? And within seconds, a small sentence becomes an endless story in your head, an unfinished plan, originally just something to be done, but you attach to it the fear of failure, the worrying of being judged, the feeling of not being good enough, and then the task is no longer just a task. It becomes a psychological burden. You see, it is the mind that inflates everything. You are not only living in reality, you are also living in layers of interpretations stacked on top of reality. And the more you interpret, the further you drift from the simplicity of life. The thing is, you have become so used to it that you no longer notice it. You think that thinking a lot is a way to protect yourself. You believe that careful analysis will help you avoid mistakes. You assume that controlling everything is the way to keep life stable. But in reality, it is the opposite. The more you think, the more you lose clarity. The more you try to control, the more uneasy you feel. The more you try to understand everything, the more lost you become in your own thoughts. Because life does not operate according to the logic of the mind. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a flow to be experienced. And when you try to turn that flow into something you can control, you begin to resist life itself. You become tense when things do not go according to plan. You feel disappointed when others do not act as you expect. You feel anxious when the future is unclear, and all that comes from a mistaken belief. I must understand and control everything. But be honest with yourself. Have you ever truly controlled your life? Can you control the passing of time? Can you ensure that every relationship will always be as you want it to be? Can you be certain that tomorrow will unfold exactly as planned? The answer is always no, and yet you keep trying. And that very effort exhausts you, not because life is too heavy, but because you are carrying too many unnecessary things. You carry fears that have not happened. You carry memories that have passed. You carry unrealistic expectations. And you call all of that your life. But in truth, they are just burdens created by the mind. There is a very important moment that many people miss. The moment you realize that you do not have to believe every thought that appears in your mind. Thoughts are not the truth. They are just reactions. But because you identify yourself with your thoughts, you begin to live according to them. You let them guide your emotions, your actions, and ultimately your whole life. And that is when life becomes complicated, not because it is inherently complicated, but because you have lost the ability to see things simply. Try to imagine a day when you do not try to explain everything. A day when you do not label every experience as right or wrong. A day when you do not try to control the outcome, but simply do what needs to be done. And then let things unfold. You think that is giving up, but in reality, that is freedom. Freedom is not when you can control everything. Freedom is when you are no longer obsessed with the need to control. When you stop trying to force life into a certain mold, you begin to feel a lightness you have never known before. Everything still happens. Work, relationships, challenges. But you are no longer carried away by them in the same way. You begin to do things with awareness instead of unconscious reaction. You begin to listen more instead of rushing to conclusions. You begin to slow down, not because you are weak, but because you understand that not everything needs to be solved immediately. And in that slowing down, you see more clearly. You realize that many things you once worried about never actually happened. Many things you once tried so hard to achieve, once achieved, did not feel the way you expected. And many things you once thought were important were actually just illusions of the mind. The truth is, life is much simpler than the way you are living it. But to return to that simplicity, you must be willing to let go of one thing, the habit of making everything complicated, not letting go of life, not letting go of goals, but letting go of the way you approach them. You do not need more to live better. You need less thinking, less control, less fear. And when you begin to let go, you will be surprised to realize that life was never a maze. It is just that you made it complicated. And at some point, after all the loops of thinking, the attempts to control, the efforts to become good enough in a world that never stops demanding, you will suddenly realize something very simple, yet carrying the weight of awakening. You never had to make life this complicated. It is not because you are weak that you feel tired. It is not because life is too harsh that you are exhausted. It is because you have been carrying too many things that do not belong to you. You carry standards set by society and forget your own inner voice. You carry invisible fears and let them control every decision. You carry unverified expectations and bind yourself to the pressure of achieving them. And gradually, you are no longer living your own life. You are living a complicated version of life, where everything must have a reason, must have a result, must have a clear meaning. While the deepest nature of life does not lie in those things, there are things you do not need to understand in order to feel. There are things you do not need to control in order for them to unfold properly. And there are moments when only by stopping your effort, you truly touch peace. Try to look back at yourself, not with judgment, but with deep listening. How fast are you running? What are you trying to prove? And is it truly necessary? You may realize that many things you once thought were important are actually just layers you have grown used to carrying. You do not need to remove everything in one day. You also do not need to become a completely different person. You only need to start with something very small. Lighten up. Lighten in the way you think. Lighten in the way you perceive. Lighten in the way you face yourself. Allow yourself not to understand everything. Allow yourself to be wrong. Allow life to unfold in its own way, not the way you try to force it to become. And in that allowing, something very strange will happen. You begin to feel lighter. Not because all problems disappear, but because you no longer carry them in the same heavy way. You still live, still work, still love, still face challenges, But there is a subtle shift within. You are no longer resisting life. You begin to move with it. And when you move with life instead of resisting it, everything becomes simple in a natural way. No need to force, no need to strain, no need to become some perfect version of yourself. Just being you in this moment is enough. You may not notice the change immediately, but if you are patient, if you truly pause and observe, you will see peace does not come from how much you can control. It comes from how much you can let go. And perhaps the most important thing you can take with you after everything you have just read is not a method, not a formula, but simply a very simple question. Am I making things more complicated? Keep that question with you, not to answer it once, but to return to it whenever you feel yourself being carried away, because every time you pause and realize is a time you come closer back to yourself, and that place where there is no strain, no forcing, no complicated stories created by the mind, is where life begins to feel as light as it truly is. If these words resonate with you, do not keep them to yourself. Leave a comment. It does not have to be perfect. Just be honest. It can be a thought, a feeling, or simply a moment when you realized how you once made everything unnecessarily complicated. And if you want to continue this journey, the journey of returning to simplicity, to stillness, to a way of living that is deep yet not heavy, subscribe to the channel. Not to follow something outside, but to remind each other that peace has never been far away. It has always been here. It is just whether you have the courage to let go and return. Wishing you, in some very ordinary moment of life, to suddenly see everything become simple again. And in that simplicity you find yourself.